My brother just told me.
Jay, why are we laughing so much?
How many years, John?
I started teaching Hamlet when Lyndon Johnson was president.
And she says, I met the youthful Lord Paris at Lawrence's cell and gave him what becoming love I might, not overstepping the bounds of modesty.
I already did that with the other
I should
guy.
say not.
Him and Beowulf and.
But you know, when he dies, he's like desperate to be remembered. Tell my story. Remember me.
Should we be doing this? Should we stop right now?
No.
We're about to do, folks, a romantic poem that Paul and I really don't teach generally. And we just both, I think, individually read it and fell in love with it. So we're really excited to share it with you all. I have a poem to start with, Paul. Do you mind if I share it?
Yeah, you want to start off this episode? With the poem. That would be great. It's going to be an episode about a poem, but we may as well stick with our regular format and open with a poem. What do you have for us?
Well, geez, I just thought about love this poem we're going to read so much. You and I were talking before air. Coleridge's Frost at Midnight. And I thought of a reverse version of this poem. It's a Billy Collins poem called No Time. And it strikes me that this is really Frost at Midnight in reverse. And it's a tiny 8-line poem.
Okay.
And it's called No Time. In a rush this weekday morning, I tap the horn as I speed past the cemetery where my parents are buried, side by side beneath a slab of smooth granite. Then, all day, I think of him rising up to give me that look of knowing disapproval while my mother calmly tells him to lie back down. I love it. I thought you would appreciate it.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome. Opposite, yes, but parallel in the powerful imagery.
Yeah, sure.
Of your parents being themselves in life and in death.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. No Time.
No Time by Billy Collins, published in 2000 in Poetry Magazine, Poetry Journal.
Wow.
Yeah,
that is great. That is a great poem to open with, and the setting of the busy season, a son and parents. Those are parallel topics for our poem tonight, Frost at Midnight. So we're carrying on with a take on Romanticism, I guess is what I would say. We're covering Romanticism, and we want to cover it by representative texts. And to dig into what we like about Romanticism, which I think is the best way to cover topics as a teacher. If you're teaching Romanticism, and you probably are, if you're doing British literature at all, maybe even with American lit, you may delve into it a little bit when you cover the Transcendentalists. I do a tiny bit. And if you dig around online for information, or you dig through your old college textbooks, you're going to find all kinds of material, and it's overwhelming. And so this is a perfect topic for Teacher Talk approach, which we focus on, if you haven't picked up on it by now, on ignoring all the experts. We are what was that the car talk guys used to say? Uninhibited by the thought processes. We are we are not a slave to experts. Instead, we read the text themselves. So our last episode, we did the preface to Lyrical Ballads, and you could do a lot worse in your quest for trying to understand what the Romantic movement is all about. You could do a lot worse. Why not listen to William Wordsworth, even in his weaknesses that you can hear in his writing, his failed attempts to be a philosopher? Still, you learn. And then today, with this fantastic poem, "Frost at Midnight" by Coleridge, another founding member of the Romantic movement, just by focusing on the poem and paying attention to the poem, and if you did a little taxonomy of the contents of the poem with your students, they would come away better informed about what Romanticism is, I think, than lots of people who've read the Wikipedia articles or whatever else it is.
You're so right. You're so right. Yeah.
So I want to go down that path, JD. I want to look at the poem. We can pull out the things that we like about it just as a poem because it's beautiful and overwhelming.
Yep.
But also maybe hovering over it like a little spirit in the fireplace, as we'll read, is this instructor, this guide, this teacher to us about Romanticism itself. So I'd like to have that be the stranger.
I love that. Yeah,
the stranger in the room for us tonight. All right, let's start off. How do we start with this, Jay?
Would you mind, Paul, if I just read the poem?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think you should. Why don't
because
you read it?
okay, so just for context, it was written before Lyrical Ballads. It was early. I think it was the winter of 1798 or like February.
That's what I got.
And even if you've just had a regular high school English literature course, you might have read Rime of the Ancient Mariner or Kubla Khan. And a lot of the poems Coleridge is most known for are supernatural. And this is what scholars called conversation poems. This is almost just like a really creative, thoughtful person up in the middle of the night at a cottage in Devonshire and just kind of thinking and trusting what his next thought is. And it's quiet,
Right.
So
and there's several of these, right? There's like 7 or 8 of them,
yeah,
I think.
yeah. This is the biggie.
Yeah, this is the big one. But if you look them up, the poems of this kind, there are others like it. Yeah.
So anyway, I'll share the poem, and what I would say to my students is don't get hung up when a word seems strange. First time, I mean, just like relax and enjoy what you enjoy, and really do not worry about answers. I think that's really, really important when you're approaching some of these difficult texts.
Yeah.
And if you're lucky enough to have a little bit of time, you can sit with it and soak in it, and then maybe develop some more text-based, thoughtful reactions. But the first time through, I would say relax. It's a man up in the middle of the night, and it goes from there.
Right.
So here we go.
Okay.
Frost at midnight. The frost performs its secret ministry, unhelped by any wind. The owlet's cry came loud, and hark again, loud as before. The inmates of my cottage, all at rest, have left me to that solitude which suits abstruser musings, save that at my side my cradled infant slumbers peacefully. 'Tis calm indeed, so calm that it disturbs and vexes meditation with its strange and extreme still silentness. Sea, hill, and wood, this populous village, sea, hill, and wood with all the numberless goings on of life, inaudible as dreams. The thin blue flame lies on my low burnt fire and quivers not. Only that film which fluttered on the grate still flutters there, the sole unquiet thing. Methinks its motion in this hush of nature gives it dim sympathies with me who live, making it a companionable form, whose puny flaps and freaks the idling spirit by its own moods interprets, everywhere echo or mirror seeking of itself, and makes a toy of thought. But oh, how oft at school, with most believing mind, presageful, have I gazed upon the bars to watch that fluttering stranger, and as oft with unclosed lids already had I dreamt of my sweet birthplace in the old church tower, whose bells, the poor man's only music, rang from morn to evening all the hot fair day, so sweetly that they stirred and haunted me with wild pleasure, falling on mine ear, most like articulate sounds of things to come. So gazed I, till the soothing things I dreamt lulled me to sleep, and sleep prolonged my dreams. And so I brooded all the following morn, awed by the stern preceptor's face, mine eye fixed with mock study on my swimming book, save if the door half opened, and I snatched a hasty glance, and still my heart leapt up, for still I hoped to see the stranger's face, townsman or aunt or sister more beloved, my playmate when we were both clothed alike. Dear babe, that sleeps cradled by my side, whose gentle breathings heard in this deep calm fill up the interspersed vacancies and momentary pauses of the thought. My babe, so beautiful, it thrills my heart with tender gladness thus to look at thee, and think that thou shalt learn far other lore, and in far other scenes. For I was reared in the great city, pent mid cloisters dim, and saw not lovely but the sky and stars. But thou, my babe, shalt wander like a breeze by lakes and sandy shores, beneath the crags of ancient mountain, and beneath the clouds, which image in their bulk both lakes and shores and mountain crags. So shalt thou see and hear the lovely shapes and sounds intelligible of that eternal language which thy God utters, who from eternity doth teach himself in all, and all things in himself. Great universal teacher, he shall mold thy spirit, and by giving make it ask. Therefore all seasons shall be sweet to thee, whether the summer clothe the general earth with greenness, or the red breast sit and sing betwixt the tufts of snow on the bare branch of mossy apple tree, while the nigh thatch smokes in the sun thaw, whether the eavesdrops fall heard only in the traces of the blast, or if the secret ministry of frost shall hang them up in silent icicles, quietly shining to the quiet. Imagine being able to do that, Paul.
I cannot. I
No,
literally
me neither.
cannot. I cannot. And
Yeah.
I like my imagination, and I like to think that it can perform
I know.
perform secret ministries like the frost.
I love that
I
so
can't
much.
do it. I can't do it.
I
There are
know.
so many great lines, so many great phrases as it goes.
It's wonderful. It really is wonderful.
I love it. The hush of nature captured the center of the poem. I think of the center of the poem, the fire, staring into the fire at night, and that's where he seems to go into the other world or the imagination world, and then starts remembering, and time's all messed up. But
Yeah.
that line I love. The the line about his son, you'll learn from God himself. And
Right.
by in thy spirit by giving make it ask. Oh my gosh.
Right.
That's an amazing line. All right, it's a long poem, so there's kind of a lot there, but it breaks down into doable bites, which I think you can break down for yourself as you're teaching, for your students if you're taking them through this. And I think you could. I haven't done this, but I think you could name your objectives for teaching Romanticism and layer them over each of the stanzas. You could probably do that. There's the emphasis on nature, the role of God in nature, the role of education, of the comparison of imagination to sea and hill and wood, the actual world around him. They are as inaudible as dreams. And so the life of the town is kind of like a dream because you don't live in it, exactly.
Yeah.
Either. So it's sort of like the dream world in your mind. So there's a connection between imagination and reality, which is a great topic in Romanticism. And then this projection out, of the future for the ideal education of his own son. And then the imagery in the final stanza itself. This is just a flex stanza.
You're so hip, Paul. You must teach teenagers.
Oh yeah, all the time. I soak it up.
Hey, Paul, is it low key a flex?
Do you know, Jay? Even out here, it's low key.
So when I heard low key for the first time, I thought they were talking about the character from Norse mythology. And if anybody's wondering if I'm a nerd, that should answer your question.
Yeah, no, that ends.
What's
right
Loki
there.
doing? What are we talking about?
Wait, they're talking about Loki. Let's go. They love me after all. They love literature class.
Oh my gosh!
Oh, I know. I have embarrassed some kids about that. Loki, what are you talking about? Yeah, they don't know. They don't even know. They can't even tell me where they got it from. But they're all doing it from Massachusetts to Ohio.
Well, I'm glad. I'm glad it's not just a Massachusetts privilege, Paul, that you people in the Midwest are enjoying.
No,
we've
benefited from it too. Low-key.
Paul, I'm low key enjoying this.
Yeah, well, it is. It is. This final stanza is a flex of.
It really is
poetic powers, and it almost seems to just abandon the rest of the poem and just closes out with this. With this high, it's amazing. Shall hang them in silent icicles, quietly shining to the quiet moon. Oh my gosh!
And what's interesting there is if you were in a creative, so I want to touch on something you just said because I think it's wicked important, and I'm
Okay.
saying wicked because I'm in Massachusetts and I can.
Yeah. Now that has
Um,
not made it to Ohio. Wicked
I
is
know, and you're the
pretty
worst
regional.
for it. I want to say.
Yeah. I've tried to spread it. I really have. That's been my job out here.
You got to work harder. Evidently, that's what it has to happen. So, what's interesting to me is what you just said about the last stanza is the most sort of transparently sort of philosophical / theological. Like the other ones are very narrative. There's a flashback. There's really wonderful imagery. There's this, even the sounds of the poetry are beautiful.
Yes.
So to me, the question is, and I think you've answered it, is I think a poet has to earn a final stanza like that. So if that happened earlier, if he got sort of generically philosophical in stanza 2, it's not earned.
Yeah.
It's not earned.
I like
But
that.
not to get ahead, but it feels. I mean, I spent a lot of time with this poem. I've been sort of in and out of it, and then yesterday and today, probably about 2 or 3 hours with it, journaling and like thinking, and it just feels like in such a subtle way you go from ministry, you're in a hometown church, and how great is that image, Paul, of it's the poor man's only music. I never,
Yeah.
you know, I work at a church. I know you go to church. I don't hear church bells the same way. Even when he's talking about the school he went to, which I read was Christ Hospital School, pent mid cloisters dim. Cloisters is hearkening back to an older Catholic age when that school was probably something very different. And cloisters is a religious term. And obviously God is in the end. And Ministry of Frost appears again as like really beautiful bookends. So the poem, in a sort of obvious way, if you were teaching a survey course and you had a day to teach it, I think one of the things you'd want is for the students to realize that nature and divinity not only exist side by side, but they're almost the hypostatic union. It's almost like that. What council is that? Trent? Is that Nicaea? Which council is that, Paul? You're the
I can't remember the
but
councils.
that the romantics, or at least the universe of this poem, so closely yokes nature and God.
Yeah.
That I think that last stanza that you and I love is earned.
Yeah.
Does that make sense as an idea?
Yeah, no, I think you're right, and that's a big theme, even amongst the very least traditional religious people in this movement. You think of Mary Shelley, especially in Frankenstein. It's essentially a godless book, but the reference for nature just borders on something you'd read in the Psalms. So there is that kind of religious spiritual reverence for it. And in this poem, I think you also see there's a thin line drawn between. I don't know if it's a line drawn between, or if it's just an opening in the arms to gather together both a pagan, like an ancient sort of pagan take on the religiousness of nature, with the explicitly Christian take on nature as the creation of God. And they're both in the history of Britain and in the British Isles. The old pagan ways sort of lie dormant in the soil like old seeds that are there to be sort of picked up. And then there's the explicit Christian theology, so much Christian theology in the British history as well. And it's here in the Romantics, and the Romantics pick them both up. So as a new movement, you can explicitly see, and this is a great place to go, which we talked about last time, in talking about what the different thing is that lyrical ballads is doing, that the Romantic movement is doing. It's not being neoclassical. It's somehow dropping that whole thing, but it's bringing in something almost Neoplatonic, something paganish into its Christianized mix, to above all, beyond those two things, to express the imagination. And I think that's where this poem really lives, is in that moment, almost right in the middle of the poem. I didn't count up the lines, but almost right in the middle of the poem, where Coleridge sort of goes through the looking glass, which is into the fire with the little stranger that is a companionable form, that has sympathy with me who lives. And then that seems to open up this whole world. But oh, soft is the next stanza, and then we're back in the past, and
Yeah.
and broke down that. So I think for that part of the Romantic movement, you're right. He builds up to this imagistic, theological final stanza that gathers together quite a lot of source of inspiration from
Yeah.
Christianity to paganism. I
I
think.
I can I throw something out? So I'm just thinking of like in a regular sort of Brit Lit sort of high school class,
Yeah.
whether one gets this poem or not, you might read a big medieval poem like Beowulf or Canterbury Tales. You might look at some Shakespearean sonnets. I think the 18th century is the redheaded stepchild of high school English curricula. It's kind of don't pay attention. So
Right.
imagine
Embarrassment.
trying to sell Dryden to a bunch of 17-year-olds. So
Yeah.
anyway, I'm probably just pissed off all the Dryden scholars that are listening. But anyway, I am 1,000% with you that romantics, I think, could sell themselves. It's a really wonderful combination, I feel,
Yeah.
of a very early modern sensibility that could appeal to a modern kid, while at the same time the craftsmanship is undeniable. But what's fascinating to me, reading and rereading Frost at Midnight, when we say it's a conversational poem, it feels like improvisation. Now you have to suspend,
Yeah.
to use a Coleridge term, actually from Biographia Literaria, you have to suspend your disbelief,
Yeah.
because normal people don't talk in blank verse, at least, in Massachusetts. Maybe in Ohio, Paul, it's
Nope.
possible.
Nope. They're
Okay.
not doing it. Yeah.
No, damn. Okay. So, but, so that pattern exists, but there's so many moments that feel improvised. Self-interruption in line 3, the owlet's cry came loud. Oh, hark again. Like there's all these moments throughout the poem where there's literal self-interruption. And then there's this wonderful thing, which I think is the one of the key markers of an artist, a complete trust in his next thought. So here we go. Here's the flame. Let me hang out there, which reminds me of looking out a window, which then reminds me of a church tower, which then reminds me of my childhood. Oh, and that reminds me back of the baby. Like
Right.
this, you like if you were in a creative writing class and you had a bad teacher who said, I need an outline for a 70-line poem, and you presented the outline to Frost at Midnight, the creative writing teacher, if she was bad, would say, this doesn't make any sense. You're all over the place.
Right.
But
Right.
something about the all over the placeness of it is essential, because to me, it feels like a mix of someone's real thinking in real time that's important. Yet as a crafted work of art, it's bookended with The Secret Ministry of Frost, which is so beautiful. Like, it can be corny in movies, right? Where you begin, where you end, but it seems earned here to me. I keep using that word. I don't know.
And that too is another point I think we can write down the bullet points of lists about romanticism. Isn't that like the ideal, the romantic ideal in whatever work of art it is, from music to painting to literature, poetry, is to have the feel of inspiration, of this ineffable experience you had usually in nature or in front of a fire late at night in those quiet moments, recalled, though, as we heard Wordsworth say, what did he say, recalled later and worked back through, and the poet works back through it and writes it. So it has this perfect mix of what feels instantaneous and inspirational, with, when you look closely, though, as you point out, maybe the obvious thing is that the poem ends where it begins. So there is design in this, and there's design all through it too. So it has both of those things, which is what you want. Usually when you rework something, you work it to death. It doesn't feel extemporaneous, it doesn't feel natural anymore. But Coleridge, however much he put into this,
I think that's really good.
If there is design in it, then can we kind of walk through, where does it open? Just like
let's do that,
plot.
Paul. Let's do that. That's a good call.
Let's do that. So let's walk through it from the beginning down to the end, and just give sort of the view of it as much as possible. So where does this open? So the first stanza is kind of long. How does it open up?
So the 4 stanzas, the first one opens, you'll notice it opens in medias res, like an epic poem.
Yeah.
There's no, I'm at my friend's cottage and we had a bunch of really good brandy, and like there's none of that. It launches right in with a very bold and peculiarly worded statement about the frost. And you have a mix of the lack of sound inside the cottage except for his infant, and actually the lack of sound except for the thin blue flame in the fire. And what he imagines is outside. So the silentness in the house actually makes it almost hard to think. It's so quiet.
Yeah.
And those of us with ADD listening to this, you'll be like, yes, Coleridge, you're my man.
Yeah.
I need a little anarchy to think, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And he makes a claim at the end. So that's the dichotomy, is like quiet and noise and what's inside and what's outside, and I'm in this house. But
Yeah.
at the end, this notion of making a toy of thought, I had some questions about the last four or five lines, but he sets the stage, and it's like all imagery. We have a baby, we have a fire, we have stuff maybe happening outside,
Yes.
and frost. So we're
That's
setting the
good.
scene.
Yeah, that's good. I think making a list of doing that. As you were reading it there, I just started writing down the things that are here, the setup.
Yeah.
There is deep quiet. It's contrasted with outside, the owlet's cries, the loud. And I think the loud, the repetition of loud breaks the I am in that line. Came loud and hark again, loud.
Yeah. That's really good, Paul. I love that.
Yeah, like I tripped up on that. So I was trying to just bat out, or tap out of the rhythm. So you land on loud there. So it's loud outside, but then you get inside, and it's calm and quiet inside. There's the deep solitude. 'Tis calm indeed, so calm that it disturbs and vexes meditation with its strange and extreme. I like those two words: strange and extreme silentness there. And the world around is as real as dreams. They disappear. They all are numberless. The goings-ons of life is innumerable, no doubt, but it's inaudible as a dream is. And then he draws our attention to the flame. And the flame, I think, carries from stanza 1, carries us into the stanza 2. Lies low on my low burnt fire and quivers not, only that film. And so I see his attention focusing and funneling in, and he funnels in, and he's funneling on this little flame, and this flame becomes almost a little creature. It comes on. But you had a question about this. Echoes or mirrors seeking itself. Yeah, that figure of making a toy of thought. Which way do you read that?
Yeah, it's really interesting. Like, in talking about the film, he talks about it as like motion and puny flaps and freaks. And maybe it's only sort of a fantasy, like a toy of thought. I'm kind of wrestling with that. And I just want to say to teachers too, this sounds like a cop out or a deflection. I think one of the greatest gifts we can tell our students is, hey, I've read this novel, this play, this poem a gazillion times. Here's something that I'm not sure about.
Yes. Yeah.
Because this isn't math. Like, there's not an answer at the end.
Right.
Like, we're not balancing an equation. And there's some language in here that's really messy. And the other thing, I think, other than just to shrug your shoulders, is to say, here are 2 or 3 things this could mean. Let's put them all on the table and talk about what seems to make the most sense in the context of the poem. But I think as a teacher, or if you're leading a reading group, I think that's very liberating for people who maybe aren't as confident when they see the person leading it say, I'm wrestling with this. I mean, Paul, you and I have had deep conversations about things like the Odyssey and Hamlet. I think you'd agree that the more we read it, the more questions we have.
Well, exactly. And if the more you read it, the fewer questions you have, then I don't think you're really reading it, or
you're not reading it. Exactly. 100%.
You're certainly not treating it the way Coleridge wants you to treat it.
No.
I resist looking this up because I know Coleridge does not, that breaks what he's trying to do. It's not a matter of fact in that same sense. It is a matter of experience, an experience he had, which he is replicating for you. And so when this lands for you, it should land in your combination, imagination, intellect, reason, spirit. So all those things together should land there. And then you see it, you feel it. And yeah, I don't like the imagery of flaps. I don't like that. Yeah. And so I don't picture that doesn't land for me, but an idling spirit, I like that. I see that like a pilot light in a stove, that little blue flame that's just standing there. And then it becomes like a haunt, a spirit, a ghost, like a Rumpelstiltskin, a little Rumpel spirit thing in the house, a house spirit. And then by its own moods, and this is where he starts to go down like the opium path for me, like its moods, it interprets everywhere, echoes or mirrors. And so this is where it starts bending and mirroring seeking itself, and then makes a toy out of thought, makes thought something that you play with and becomes less solid. I don't know. It's a nice image.
Yeah, and the one, I think this is in the next stanza, so I'll wait. I think we're going on the second stanza.
Yeah.
One of the
So
things
that's the setup. We'll get that for the setup, right? It's late at night.
one of the
Middle
things
night,
I
not
looked
honking
up
out.
is one of the things I looked up is stranger. I had a sense that there was a 19th century or late 18th century thing that I was just literally missing, because I didn't think it meant stranger. So one of the things I saw was it means like the soot. It was a slang term for the soot, which would denote like companionship, fireplace, being together. And then one of the sources, Harold Bloom, actually said that it foreshadowed the arrival of an absent friend. So there isn't even agreement on what the term means. I just knew that it didn't mean a person you didn't know. I knew it meant something in the house.
Yes.
Um,
Exactly. And I thought there was some mythology about it. Like the stranger of the fireplace is a haunt.
Right.
You see it in, all kinds of, stories, like Howl's Moving Castle even, is powered by, by a ghost fire, in the middle of the castle. But but yeah, there is something like that. Like it does fit. You at least can get the idling spirit and the stranger thing. And then there is something of the foretelling of some arrival of a stranger, which you get in the second stanza, right? I still hope to see the stranger's face. So yeah, you do end up landing there. And I think it's a good, like if you're thinking about, all right, how much do I read? When do I look up? There are things you get the sense that there is some there's some folkloric thing being referenced, and the word stranger reused as it is, I think, is one of those things, that might.
He seems in stanza 2 to take great comfort in remembering church.
Yeah. Okay. Stanza 2.
Like Coleridge is a very theologically grounded guy and philosophically grounded writer in his nonfiction. But I mean, he didn't just say, I'm in this moment now, and it's reminding me of school. It's church tower, and then he riffs on the church tower, and then how it rang and what the weather was when it rang, and it gave me pleasure, and it fell in my ear, and it foreshadowed things to come. And so he stays on the church bell sort of feeling for a while.
Yeah, it's true. There's a lot out of it.
And it seems like the speaker of the poem takes much more comfort in church than he does in school, because he wakes up, he remembers waking up with the teacher's face and his face. And then I love this, because we've all had the experience of we have a book literally in front of us and we can't pay attention to it. And he refers to it as his swimming book, which the word swimming gets so much work done for him.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And then as he's reading, or even like failing to read the book that he's distracted from, stanza 2 ends by just wishing the door would open and maybe a literal stranger's face would show up, or somebody he knows. And it ends with this really prosaic but also quaint and nice image of remembering his playmate, and when we were dressed alike. And I did find out that boys until several years old would wear dresses. Which is probably why it leads cognitively, the leap from, oh yeah, I remember my playmate when we were both clothed alike, would lead naturally back to the baby in the cradle right next to him. So, and it's this really nice thing. There's a moment in Othello, and I know you weren't thinking of Othello here, but
I was not. No.
There's a moment where Iago is planning what to do. And in a soliloquy, one of the lines is, "Oh, I have it." And then he just talks about what he's going to do to Othello. And it feels like
hell and death will be engendered here, or something like
that. It feels like improv. Clearly not, but it feels like improv because of the syntax and the diction. This, maybe that. And I feel like that here. That my playmate, we're both clothed alike. Here's this baby who's clothed probably like not that differently than we were clothed years ago. And then he riffs there. So it seems ADD-ish.
Yeah.
But it actually isn't. Like it has the illusion of an improvised set of feelings and cognitive leaps that sort of trust each other, but they do go together in a really well structured way that makes sense in the context of the poem.
Yeah, I think that's it. It is imaginative and it flows like imagination, but it has a thread of continuity that even these many years on can still make sense, even if some of the imagery in the language doesn't.
Yeah.
But so stanza 2 takes off then. So he's looking at the fire, and then the fire, and then all of a sudden, again with no explanation, just as the poem opened, but oh soft, how at school. And all of a sudden we're at school, but he got there through the fire, with a most open and believing mind. I've gazed upon the bars, which I take to mean the bars in the fireplace,
Yep.
to watch the fluttering stranger. He's like, I've been here before. I used to sit and half sleep with unclosed lids and watch the fire when I was a kid in school, and dream about, and that's where he talks about all the things. School's not the thing, as you said, Jay. That's not what's emphasized, but the things he remembered and dreamed about when he was at school: the old church tower, the bells, the music, how articulate and pleasurable it all was, and how he dreamed and dreamed and dreamed. And then there's the teacher's stern face in his, and the books swimming in front of his eyes, neither really doing anything or meaning anything, and he's just waiting for. And then there's that connection to the stranger, the fire stranger, to another person. So we get from late at the middle of the night, staring at the fire, and that opens up an intense memory of childhood.
Yeah.
And that's stanza 2. Then stanza 3.
Oh man.
Dear babe. Now we're on, as you said, this evokes this babe, this child who will soon be going to school, soon be dressed as his school friends were dressed. He begins to speak to his baby Hartley, I think his name was. Who's sleeping in this little cottage in Somerset, where they're living now, close to Wordsworth and Dorothy Wordsworth, and writing. And then he riffs on the baby. What does he want for his baby? Something different, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's a romantic fantasy, and not to spoil the end, the more I think and meditate on this poem and read it, I guess you could reduce almost any work of literature to this, but I think it does. This poem addresses this in a peculiar way. This speaker of these words craves connection.
Interesting. I didn't think that.
There's a desire to connect to nature in a very particular way, to his son in a particular way, to his past. He clearly feels connected to some spiritual sense in the past. Academically, not so much. And we learn later it was sort of a punitive, urban sort of environment. And Coleridge wants his son in nature, and that's not where he was raised. And it isn't simply, trees are better than buildings. He has this sense, and I feel like you can even see a version of this in Tolkien. Nature's where God is. Nature's where God has, I don't know how to say this without being heretical. That God can speak in and through nature in a very specific, potent way, in a way that maybe you don't feel walking around a town.
Yeah.
And the Romantics basically say this, whether they use God. Like Shelley's an atheist, he won't say God. Coleridge, definitely not. I mean, Coleridge's a Christian guy. So they're all, and again, here's another example. If you study the Romantics deeply, not like they all agree on everything. They're not one monolithic group of people. They're actually wildly, even Wordsworth and Coleridge, wildly different from each other.
Right.
So, and I love that. Like, it makes them people, not types. You know what I mean?
Yes, and is another argument for reading them, finding representative texts and reading them to understand the movement, instead of trying to reduce them all to some, something in common. That's not really their most interesting parts, I don't think.
No, exactly. And I'm fascinated by the word cloisters. I mean, I almost became a Benedictine monk, and cloisters, obviously, if this was a medieval poem, the center of silent prayer of a religious group. Now it's maybe a place where like little kids study in a building that used to be a Catholic building and now is housing a bunch of kids they have to control. But it's a suffocating, enclosed environment in a city, as opposed to sky and stars and clouds and lakes and shores and mountains and all the other things.
Exactly. So that's what I took it to be. It is the parallel. The cloister is for religion what the school was for education. Is that formal? And for both, you go out to where he's going to send his little son, to learn the eternal language of God, and and to be like God, and be educated, and to worship. So it covers both of those bases. His, unfortunately, was in a cloister in a school. His sons won't be. So yeah, that's the parallel I took there too. I agree.
Yeah, and it's and in terms of do you want to go to the last stanza real quick?
Yeah, I want to say one last thing about this.
Yeah, go ahead.
This stanza. I like it, as you said. It's like it's like a dream, for his son. And as I was reading it, I expected some kind of sarcasm in it. Like that thing of parents. I'll be the parent my parent wasn't. I won't make the mistakes they made.
Yeah.
I'll do it right. That sort of thing that the poet lets you see through even sometimes. And I don't get any of that in this. I feel all like it's completely earnest. And I think it's so because it's not really about him raising his son. I don't think that's it. What it really is a chance for him to tell us what he believes is true, which is, it's not about parenting here. Not really. It's about the ancient mountains and the clouds and the lakes and the language of God and eternity, where you can learn and teach, where he can learn, where his son can learn, where everyone learns. So that's what it's really about.
Yeah.
He just uses uses his kid and the instance of raising his kid as a way of saying it. But that's it. So that stanza 3 moves to his child, averts to his child and to nature. Reflection on the reflection of his own childhood, and then we get the closing, powerhouse closing.
Yeah, the initial chunk of the closing stanza. Therefore, all seasons shall be sweet to thee, my baby. Whether the summer clothe the general earth with greenness, or the red breast sit and sing betwixt the tufts of snow on the bare branch of mossy apple tree. So, like, regardless of the time of year, because this is where God's spirit lives and you're going to be connected to it, all seasons will be sweet to you. I think that's what he's just on a literal level saying.
Yeah.
The rest of this is somewhat mysterious to me. While the nigh thatch smokes in the sun thaw.
Yeah.
What do you take that to be?
I see that as thatch roof,
right?
Melting, like
in the sun.
In the sun, the sun rising, right? And that's the mist coming off of it in the sunrise. That's
and
the
then
smoke.
Then he basically says maybe that'll happen, or the opposite, which is the secret ministry of frost, hang them up in silent icicles quietly shining.
What's the them? What's the them? What's that pronoun them?
I was wondering that. So eavesdrops, or trances of the blast.
It's eavesdrops. It's eavesdrops. So whether the drops falling off the edge of the house, there's no gutter because there's it's thatch, and they're heard in the trances of the blast, or if the secret ministry of the frost takes them and hangs them and paints them into webs on the window. Back to the frost, hang them in silent icicles on the panes, or just hangs them off the edge, I guess. Quietly shining to the, oh my gosh, quietly shining to the quiet moon. Okay, no, that's good. Them. I didn't get the them there, but it's eavesdrops.
That was good clarification for me.
Yeah, same. So they either drop or freeze, quietly shining, the icicles shining there in the silence of a cold winter morning or winter night to the quiet moon.
So is the basic sort of thesis of the conclusion that regardless of the climate, the seasons will be sweet to you?
Yes. Yeah. And the whole regard, there's probably a literary device that names this, and I don't know that name, but it's, again, a frame up, a way of getting on the page the beauty of all the seasons. By using a conceit. The seasons shall all be sweet to you, whether it's, and then it's going to go down the path and give you season beauty in those small little lived ways that center around a tiny thatched hut, which he's currently sitting in right now in front of the fire late in the middle of the night. So it's a beautiful frame up of the beauty of nature, which makes you feel it. If it works in the imagery of it makes you feel the various associated feelings you've had of experiencing, frost and quiet and the moon and steam coming off the grass or off your roof or whatever.
Yeah. And I think I have good days teaching poetry and probably plenty of not good days. I try to do two things consistently. One is, how are you as a human being with your life responding to this?
Hmm.
And the second thing is, okay, if this is a poem about nature and fathers and sons, there's a gazillion poems like that. What's peculiar about this poem as a poem? I want to honor the art, but
Yeah.
I want to honor both the art and the personal response. I think we could do both and make poetry sort of dynamic rather than just subjective personal response or just this
Right.
clinical thing.
Right. I
So
like that.
I think there's all kinds of stuff in there as dads like you and I. For me, some of what this poem is saying to me personally is that feeling of wanting better things for your kids than you had.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
this is
yeah.
just this super imaginative speaker expressing that, not me expressing
Yeah.
it.
That's right. That's
But I
right.
think on
And
the
that's natural. That's natural, right? You mentioned that
totally
as a
natural.
dad,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
we're still talking about nature here.
yeah. And I think on the level of I'm a musician, so I try to pay really close attention to music in poetry.
Yeah.
And I teach my kids just the basics of prosody, just nothing crazy. But I mean, if there's something intentional in the music, I think we all have access to it. This isn't subjective. So this first line is interesting musically, right? The frost performs its two iambic perfect feet, right? Its secret is a medial stress, and then ministry is a dactyl. It's stressed, unstressed, unstressed. It's what the Greek line was made of, 6 of those.
Yeah.
So the word ministry is disruptive.
It
Like
is.
it's musically disruptive to the iambic line, and it's also just we don't think of frost as having ministry. So it's just a peculiar way of looking at frost said in a way that's musically peculiar. So the musical peculiarity of it highlights, I think, the diction peculiarity of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't think that means kids have to write a thesis paper on that. I just want them to appreciate the fact that this is built in a particular way. And then later you have like thin blue flame, low burnt fire. You have this like very slow, deliberate fireplace sort of lines. And the poem's feeling kind of slow and deliberate, and the lines echo that. And there's two, I think. Let's see. Yeah, there's two iambic pentameter lines in the entire poem. And I'd like to say that this is very normal. When we say like sonnets are 14 lines of iambic pentameter, what we're saying is that the backbeat is iambic. Most of the lines will not be perfectly iambic.
Right.
There's a lot of musical variety. And I think I may have made this statement elsewhere, maybe I didn't. So Paradise Lost is my favorite poem, and it isn't till about 100 lines in where we get the first iambic pentameter line, and it's oh how unlike the place from whence they fell. So the first iambic pentameter line recalls heaven where the fallen angels had fallen from. So the first iambic pentameter line is a reflection of literal perfection.
Wow.
You
Wow.
got to be pretty good, Paul, right? And he's also blind writing that, which should make you angry. But line 23, goes from the first to the second stanza and makes a toy of thought, but oh, how oft. So this critical notion at ending the first stanza, switching to this. I don't have any deep things to say. I find that weird. And then later it's for still, I hope to see the stranger's face. That is it in terms of like the literal perfect music of the poem. And I just think it's good to point that out. And then you pointed out earlier exactly right. I love when my students or any reader does this. When something is really like strong or clunky or odd, 99% of the time, if you're in the hands of a great poet, they're wanting us to notice.
Yes.
They're wanting us to notice something, right? Because if we have music that goes like this, dum 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 dum, and all of a sudden I go dum 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 da da dum da da dum. Well, musically, we would all notice that as a variety. Well, poets do this. Poets are musicians linguistically, like it's fine, And kids like seeing kind of under the hood of a poem, I think. Now, this doesn't mean you've unlocked the meaning. I think
no.
the personal connection stuff is great, and I would encourage anybody reading this to find their own way in. If I'm 16 reading this, I'm not going to look at it as a dad, but maybe I'll look at it as someone who can remember the past and long for it, whatever.
Yeah. Or
Um,
who has had quiet, still moments.
yeah,
Where
exactly.
things have popped and have caught their attention, and you notice the passage of time differently than the passage of time.
1,000%. Yeah, 1,000%.
Everyone's had those. Everyone's had those.
Yeah, 1,000%. And you know what I mean? So I definitely,
I do. And
I
it's a
think
way.
this is an Achilles heel of a lot of English rooms, and I've done it, where you ignore the fact that you have living, breathing humans reading this thing written for humans. Like, let's acknowledge that they can connect to it in ways that we can't plan. I think that's great. And then at the same time, acknowledge things that as an English teacher, you realize, oh my gosh, look at how this person intentionally did this amazing thing. I think you could do both, and in a dream world, connect them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I think you're right. They do like to see, as you said, see under the hood, to see how, and I think my students have to be encouraged to do this, to say that there is design underneath it, that just by, as you said, just by tapping out the lines does not unlock the whole poem for you, but it does help you to begin to unlock the poem. It is one way of turning your head and drawing your attention. And there are other ways, but that's, the rhyme scheme is one way. The meter is another way of making you land on things, like he does in the first stanza. Both land on loud and quiet, because the other line that's hard to read, that it's hard to tap out, is, after this my cradled infant slumbers peacefully, 'tis calm indeed, so calm that it disturbs and vexes meditation.
Yeah.
With its strange extreme silentness. Extreme silentness. I can't, and extreme silentness, sea, hill, wood. The line's totally messed up.
Yeah, it's clunky.
It's not iambic pentameter. Sea, hill, and wood. And extreme. So you get, I get an emphasis on silentness and an emphasis previously on on the loud. So those two things, the contrast, the outside and the inside, I guess, I just push that forward to the students as a way of finding the things to pay attention to, and that you need to, as you were saying, coordinate your experience of the poem, which Coleridge, of all people, seems to be open to you having, with the design of the poem. And that's mirrored. It's just an echo of the way they see nature and God and imagination and intellect and human experience. All of those things talk to each other, guide each other. There's extemporaneous inspiration in them, but then there's also design, which I take part of that first line to be the frost performs its secret ministry. Frost makes those frost patterns, or even, which is like a pattern of a snowflake, which I remember hearing somewhere, that all snowflakes are slightly different. In their design. So it is a secret, magic-like ministry of work that it's doing, in the middle of the night. So there's design hidden behind that, just sort of natural flow of the night. So anyway, it's all there. It's all there. So I think you could map it out. It's a great place to go as a teacher to get Romanticism, to get a picture of what Romantic poetry was doing, was paying attention to. And again, we said this in preface to Lyrical Ballads, that Wordsworth says, from the very ordinary, it doesn't have to be these massive, heroic, historical events and scenes for you to get to big human experience. You can get them from the tiniest thing. And indeed, that is what Coleridge is doing here, from a baby sleeping to a fire almost going out, to frost on the window pane.
Love that.
And you're at the depths of the voice and the teaching of God himself. So that resonates, and I think that resonates with our students. Our students like that. They're definitely more more. I mean, part of it's just their narcissism. They believe in themselves, in their ordinary experience is as good as anything else.
The token of ultimate reality is their own experience.
Yes, exactly.
Which is very romantic.
Yeah.
No, really,
It is. It actually is. I mean, the romantics just want you to take that further. They don't think you're taking it far enough. Probably.
Right.
Go further.
To be honest,
all right. I think that's a good. It's a good covering. Does that kind of get it?
Love it. Yeah, and I just suggest to folks, if you're new to Coleridge, just I wouldn't start with his literary criticism. He's very famous for it, but it's pretty dense. It's readable. It's fine. Rime of the Ancient Mariner is his big book. Kubla Khan is this imaginative sort of fever dream that's crazy and amazing. Christabel is amazing. Enjoy it, like soak in it. His imagination fears nothing.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And then this one too, for someone who writes philosophically better than Wordsworth, I think.
Definitely
You can
does.
still see his poetic power too. He's
Oh God,
one of those triple threats, you love to hate, because he can do both.
You should have
kinds of
seen him tap dance, Paul. No.
It's right up there with Ginger Rogers. I bet,
I guarantee people this is the only podcast on the internet that connects Ginger Rogers and Samuel Taylor Coleridge, thanks to Paul Kelly.
That's right. I watched all those. Yeah, in high heels. I don't know if he wore the high heels, but
If he had laudanum, and I think all bets were off after a couple.
Yeah, that's true. That's right. That's believable. Well, it's good. If you like this and you're working out your own teaching of various topics, comment, engage. I would like to hear what you are doing and how you are teaching poetry and keeping your students and yourself reading the primary text, sticking to the sources, and developing your not only your understanding but also your pedagogy and the experience of teaching your students to think literarily, to think poetically, as they're going through the year.
Definitely.
All right. Well, Jay, thanks for that. Thanks for the opening poem, too. No Time. It's a great opener.
Yeah. Good to see you, Paul.
All right. You too. See you next time.
All right. Bye-bye.